Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today I am looking at Dark Places and Demogorgons for Old School Essentials. Let's roll it. Dark Places and Demogorgons was first released by Bloat Games back in 2017 using their own game engine, which is called Survive This, with an exclamation point. The system feels a lot like basic expert D&D from back in the day, though it does have several tweaks which I find interesting, like the fact that the different classes each have their own formulas to roll to create their saving throws, which I do find kind of cool. I think it's the similarity between BX and Survive This which inspired this version of the game. Not only can it piggyback on Old School Essentials' excellent reputation as the definitive version of BX D&D, it also opens up a whole pile of monsters and treasures to include in the game without any need for conversion. That is a double win for Bloat Games, and no wonder they did this. So let's take a look. The game is, as it states, designed for use with Old School Essentials, and that's more than a call-out to trade off the OSE brand. All of the mechanics for the game, from character creation to rules for combat, they're handled by OSE. So to use this book, you will need some form of Old School Essentials. Many folks are going to opt for either the Advanced or Classic Fantasy volumes to cover this requirement, but it's not really necessary because Necrotic Gnome puts out a free 60-page PDF of the basic rules for Old School Essentials, and that's going to cover all the mechanics a table is going to need. The only things that are found in the DPND for OSE book, that's really fun to say, are materials that are essential for the game's 80s setting. This includes an opening essay on life in the 80s, which will send 80s kids like me on a nostalgia trip. There's 21 new classes based on tropes from 80s pop culture, chapters for both spells and psionic powers, a gazetteer on the default setting for Jefferson Town. There are some adventure hooks, and then a bestiary. My favorite part of the book is the Jefferson Town chapter. It's filled with every 80s cliche on the planet. There's different types of factions, NPCs galore. There's mysterious locations which tie into the various adventure hooks which are included in the book. And so if you're interested in nothing else about Dark Places and Demogorgons, but you need a location dripping with vibe for an 80s adventure, this chapter alone makes the game worth picking up. My second favorite chapter introduces all those new classes to the game. It's 69 pages long, so it's a good chunk of the book, and as stated earlier, they're all based on various 80s tropes, including Metalhead, Final Girl from horror movies, and Preppy. Everybody remembers Izod. Each class has a minimum attribute requirements to play. There's a base hit die, armor and weapon restrictions, and a number of class abilities which expand as the character progresses. So you have an extreme athlete, for example, who can use their specialty ride, a BMX bike or a skateboard, to shred. And this grants them bonuses to hit, damage, and armor class. It's kind of cool. Each class has its own progression table, which includes their saving throw values, just like Old School Essentials. They did a good job with that. A lot of the tropes in the classes, though, like the princess class, they're going to be considered dated and toxic nowadays. And I actually think that's the point of the game. These classes are designed for an amped up 80s reality where all the tropes get turned up to 11 in order to highlight the ridiculousness of it all. But folks who have either not watched Stranger Things or they have no nostalgia for the 80s, they might find things a little bit weird or awkward or, like I said earlier, toxic. For my part, though, I'll be happy to roll up a geek and play out my childhood daydreams of being on an adventure right at home, because the nostalgia does hit hard, and I think the weirdness of it is kind of the point. The cover art, done by Runehammer himself, is stunning. It's a terrifying visage of a Demogorgon coming through a portal with just a hint of the modern setting on display. Dark Places and Demogorgons is unashamed of its nod to Stranger Things, and that feeling, it's right there on the cover. The rear cover has no blurb, which I did find interesting. It opts instead to display some inked artwork in the same style that you're going to find inside the book. And at first glance, it's an ordinary scene of a bunch of kids at a movie theater, but as you glance at it more, the details come into focus, and it takes on an odd vibe, just like the game itself. Both pieces of cover art do a terrific job depicting the nature of the game. Really well done. Now, there's nothing on the interior cover pages, though, and that bums me out a bit because I'm coming to expect a pseudo GM screen in those spaces. But it's not really a universal practice, so I can't knock Bloke Games for not including anything there. The interior artwork, it's all good, but my favorites are the full-page pieces by Christopher Torres. The reason why is because I used to love collecting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics as well as the old RPG when I was a kid. That's pre-cartoon, and Torres's work makes me feel like I'm paging through those old volumes. It's got a very similar vibe to it. I love it. And then you get to the interior layout, and that becomes a bit of a mishmash. See, Bloke Games did a really good job emulating OSE's stellar design for the character class presentation. Most of the character classes are laid out on a 2-page spread, and even when character descriptions extend to an additional pages, it's due to the new classes needing a little bit more explanation for their abilities. Information is also conveyed in OSE's bullet point format, though the descriptions in Dark Places and Demogorgons tend to be a bit more wordy than the actual OSE books. It's a really hard thing to do, and Bloke Games does a really good job trying to get to it. After the character classes, however, the layout gets more and more random. There are certain things like headers and footers, they remain consistent throughout the book. There's a textured black field in the header, which presents a chapter title. Footers are a simple black line with the page number centered on the page below. But there's a lot of inconsistencies which pop up through the rest of the book. Top-level headings in the psychic abilities section, for example, they're presented in all caps and centered on the page. But in the magical equipment section, they're still all caps, but the font is much larger, it's left justified, and now they're accompanied by a textured line underneath, which helps link the heading with their accompanying text. That latter is a nice look, and I would have liked to see it employed throughout the book. And then you get to the Jeffersontown chapter, and heading fonts change again, but now there's variations for each different section of the town. This is done to convey the mood of each separate section of that chapter. For example, the school uses a varsity font, and the antique shop uses an old English font, and it's meant to help convey the immersion of being inside this town, but it just ends up making the book feel less unified for me. There's also some layout quirks in the book, and the most notable of these is the bullet lists themselves. Top-level bullets are given a sizable first-line indent from the bullet, really about twice what you would need in order to create that separation that you need. And then the second-line wrap doesn't match the first-line indent, which means that succeeding lines of text are actually under the bullet point. It undermines the separation a bullet point is meant to provide. Sublists, though, while having a larger separation from the bullet than what I would consider necessary, they actually do wrap succeeding lines of text to fit up with that first line indent. This leaves me wondering if the top-level lists are set up that way in order to conserve space in the book, but if that's the case, then keeping those bullets as regular body text, that would both look better and accomplish the same outcome. So I'm not sure why it's set up like that. Tables are well designed with a nice alternating row color, but they do include a thick border around every cell, which makes them feel heavy. And I'm really not sure they're necessary for readability because the columns are all lined up well and the vertical space has some nice padding to it, so the borders could have been dropped without causing any problems. I'm not sure why they are there. And then you have typos, which are something, as I pointed out in my Grimwood City for Easy D6 review, that I always feel bad about pointing out because I'm a terrible proofreader for my own material. But this is a commercial project which cleared a nice Kickstarter, and there's just too many typos in this book. It really needed another pass for editing or two. Dark Places and Demogorgons for OSE is a 306-page, stitch-bound, A5 digest-sized book, and it looks great sitting on the shelf next to the official OSE releases. As I mentioned earlier, the artwork on the front and back covers are stunning, and the book comes with a book ribbon, that is always a cause for celebration. That always is going to get a thumbs up for me. Unfortunately, the book matches OSE's dimension, but it doesn't follow suit on their paper choice. Dark Places and Demogorgons for OSE is printed on glossy paper. It's just not as pleasant to read as the OSE books are, and glare becomes an issue. I'm not sure why Bloke Games made this choice, since the entire book is black, white, and gray, really. There's just a little bit of red in there, so there's no colors for the glossy pages to make pop, and going with flat paper just would have made a better overall experience. All in all, though, the book is compact, it's well constructed, and it should last a while. So, what do I think? I do like this book, despite its layout quirks and its editing issues. And also, if you have old school essentials and you want to throw a bunch of OSE things into the alt 80s of Dark Places and Demogorgons, then I think this is a book that's worth checking out. If you don't already own Old School Essentials, though, I think I'd have to recommend passing on this particular version of the game and pick up instead Dark Places and Demogorgons Unlimited Edition instead. That latter book uses Bloat Games Survive This system. It adds some nice twist to the old school D&D feel of the game, and it's got most of the stuff that's here in this book. I just think that's probably a better fit if you don't already have OSE. However, if you want to pick up a copy of this game, you can pick up a print copy of Dark Places and Demogorgons at Bloat Games' website for $50. PDFs are available on DriveThruRPG for $19.99. So my full review queue is rather lengthy right now. I've started reading Pendragon at long last, and I'm very excited to get into it. And as a physical product, it's beautiful. I can't wait to really delve into it deeper. I've also received my copy of The Electric State. That book is calling to me. Claim the Sky and Rust and Redemption are sitting both in my queue, and they're mocking me. I need to get that. I also just picked up Crown and Skull from Runehammer's game store in Philly, and that's something that I've needed to get to for a very long time. But I've also got some first looks that I want to share with folks as well, including a fascinating game called Zombie Road, which is currently in its crowdfunding campaign. And there's also a new version of Worldographer that I need to check out as well as this really cool map making software that's probably my favorite for making towns right now, called Canvas of Kings, which is also going to be showing up as a first look at some point in the very near future. So I am going to be quite busy with all of this, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. But until we see each other again, folks, happy playing, everyone.